Welcome to the podcast series Talking Success, connecting the global FinTech community. I'm Stacey Jafta, and today I'll be chatting with Aneesa Ameer, Head of Innovation at ABSA Life and Managing Director of Imagine Inc. ABSA Life offers cover for life, disability, or critical illness at competitive prices. Hi Aneesa, thanks for joining me on the podcast. How's your day going?
Hi, Stacey. Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure. And yeah, it's bright and sunny outside, but still a winter's day, so all good.
Completely understand. Yeah, in Cape Town, some days are freezing and then other days it's a summer's day and I'm outside and feeling boiling. So the weather is a little bit confusing.
Cape Town's one of those 4 seasons all in one day happening, right?
In one day, exactly.
Awesome.
I want to jump right in. You've spoken at conferences and I've heard from many that your story stands out. I'd love to hear about your journey and how your family influenced who you are today.
Thank you so much. I think that's such a huge compliment. So thanks, Stacey. Just in terms of family influence. So if I take the story back to the year 2000, right? Everyone was in this panic and turmoil around Y2K and data being missing and the bank's not going to give me my money and what do I need to do? But back home, we were dealing with something, very, very crazy. My dad decided that he wanted to open a business. And he didn't have a degree. He didn't have a backing in terms of this nest egg that we needed to fall on, but he had a deep passion and he had this desire to open a furniture store. And I think he, at a very young age, knew his purpose. You know, he wanted to beautify people's homes. He wanted to make them feel comfortable in their homes. I guess, just seeing him, we didn't see him often, but seeing how he strived to make this business a success was just something for me that will always stand out. And I mean, obviously watching my mom, steer the ship and keep the lights on and doing whatever it takes to make us feel secure from a financial perspective, whether it was holding down 2 jobs, whether it was learning a new skill. She was just amazing in terms of constantly reinventing herself to make ends meet for us. And I think just watching the two of them, a male entrepreneur and a female entrepreneur, if I can call it that, for me has been such a blessing in my life. And I think it's really shaped who I am. So, I mean, when I left school, I didn't know what I wanted to become. I was 17. I didn't even know who I was, right? And I opted to study something in HR. And it just didn't feel like the right thing. And I've studied, I think from the time I've left school up until now, I'm still studying.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, it's kind of been that point around, it just doesn't feel right. There's something else. And what is that something else, right? So I've done HR, I've done process engineering, I've done project management. I then did a BCom in industrial psychology because I looped back to there's something more about the human that I need to understand. And then I got involved in innovation. And I think that's for me where I found my fit. So if I think like innovation is very much, it's all about the experimentation of stuff and is something going to work? And in my mind, I see it as being an entrepreneur, although it's in a safe space, like ABSA Bank. It's about trying and testing new stuff. And if it doesn't fail, trying something new, which I think a lot of entrepreneurs face in their day-to-day. I mean, that's their life. That's how they live, right? It's about trying new things. If it doesn't work, picking yourself up, trying again, and having that perseverance and actual grit to see things through. A lot of where I come from has shaped who I am today. So yeah, I mean, my dad in his business had, he wasn't tech savvy. Like I mentioned, he didn't have degrees. He didn't have, he couldn't, if I had to say, put a business case together, he would probably have stared at me blankly and wondered what I'm talking about. But he had this deep-seated passion just to understand his customers. And I think he dealt with a very low LSM base, right? And their houses are very different to what we know normally as a normal housing structure. So they've got low rise ceilings. And my dad spent many of his days driving through to these different townships, having a look at the houses, seeing what type of furniture would best fit their homes. And I think in doing that, he actually built such sincere and authentic relationships with the people of these different areas, that they relied on him not just on advice for furniture or for products, but more like from a life perspective. He actually became their friends. If I look back on his journey,
Did he always have a passion for people?
I think he did. Hey, I think he was that type of person. I mean, if you ever came to our home, you couldn't leave without having a meal. You couldn't leave without, I mean, when he was at home, we all needed to sit together. We all needed to be together. He was a very warm person, and I think it was not just in how he was at home, but he took his authentic self to his business. And I think that pulls through in what he was trying to do as well. So if I think back on his relationships, it was never about the next sale. It was never about the profit he was going to make. It was always about, is the product I'm giving you fit for what you need? And I mean, the stuff, the furniture that he sold was customized to what the actual customer needed,
Oh,
Um,
wow.
so I think he found such joy and such a reward in making people feel comfortable in their homes. It didn't matter that you lived in a room, in a one bedroom apartment. The fact that you were comfortable and you had something that you could wake up to and it looked beautiful in your home, for him, inspired him to want to do this more and more for more people.
What were your biggest takeaways from your father's customer relationship style?
Wow. So, I grew up thinking it's all about digital technologies, and him and I would always have these conversations about, why don't you put your company on Facebook? Why don't you go in, create a website, do something
Yeah.
online? And for him, it was, my customer needs are very different from what you're talking about. They come into the shop and it's more like a social visit, and they end up seeing something that they like. And if they don't see something that they like, we have an amazing conversation, and life goes on. So I think his relationships were so real and meaningful, and authentic. He knew every customer by name, and they knew him by name. So they would walk in and ask for him. I mean, I would be there to help on a Saturday, and they didn't want to speak to me. They didn't know who I was. They looked for him. He was their go-to person. And I think if there's one thing that I can take away from him, and I think I find it purposeful in my job, is about, how do you understand your reason for being in the business that you're in? And in the life insurance space, for me, it's about giving our customers comfort that we are there for them and we will be there for them in tough times, right? And I think growing up with that mindset of, you need to know why it is that you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
It's been so ingrained in me watching him do that, I think if I ever find myself in a job where that purpose isn't aligned, I'll know it very quickly, just because of watching him and watching my mom do what they did. It's been very grounding for me to look back and reflect on those life lessons, and realize that I am where I'm supposed to be.
There are so many successful businesses that talk about personalizing customer experiences. I know, for example, Airbnb in their startup phase was going to each house, personalizing their encounter. They would go and meet every single new guest. And they talk so much about, once you start scaling, you obviously have to adapt and change that method. But the importance, especially in the beginning stages, to get to know your customers. That's how you learn what they like, what they don't like, how you can change your business. I think that's so important.
I think, if I go back to like a time where he grew with families. So like, as someone was getting married, he knew, the daughter of the house is getting married. How can I help you? How can I jump in? What does she need? He would go out and source stuff. And I would think, like, how do you even know this? But it was all through the communications and the meetings that he would have with them, and that real human connection that I think, as much as we talk about big data and we talk about, 4IR is here, but I think it will never replace that human connectedness of really, really understanding your customer.
And it has so many benefits as well. Like, as you said, if he knew that somebody in the family was getting married, it probably meant that they were moving to a new house. They would need new furniture. So in return, it's great for the business.
Exactly.
What would you do differently from the way your father ran the store? And then what do you think you'd have done the same?
Yeah. So I think if I can go with what I would do the same first, I think the valuable lessons of human connectedness for me, it's such a strong pillar that I think any business needs to be grounded on. The minute you start appearing to your customers as though you are driving for just a profit, you lose customers. I think people vote with their feet, right? And if at any time a customer feels as though this is just you're not doing what's good for me, you're doing what's convenient for you, you'll start losing business. So for me, that authentic connectedness is so important, and also building your solutions around what your customer wants, not what's good for you internally. Often, and I mean, just if I think about different case studies that I've read about businesses that didn't succeed, where companies were so internally focused around it makes sense because the process is easier internally this way, and they don't realize how much of a burden they're placing on the customer to fulfill that process. um, Customers of today don't look at if it's difficult for me to do, I'm not gonna buy from you. There's probably a thousand other places I could go to get the same thing, from a product perspective. So I think for me, it's about, he simplified their journeys to such a point where it was almost like, here's the product, here's a picture. Do you like it? Can I order it? And I think for them, it wasn't about, they didn't want the digital technology either. They wanted to come in and sit and have the hour-long chat with him. It was that social engagement that, for me, I don't think I would want to take away from my business. I want to carry that forward, right? In terms of what I would do differently, I think back on his filing systems and the admin that he had, and for me, I would definitely digitize that stuff. I think it would give me more time to focus on the human relations. So I think digital definitely does have a place to play in today's companies. But I think the manual stuff, the things that take up time, the things that are not benefiting the value to the relationship, I would digitize. So definitely putting my company on a digital platform, that would be the first thing that I would do differently. My dad believed otherwise. But yeah, I think all in all, there's a lot that I would take from him, just from the human connectedness and authenticity of who you are in your business, and that being shown through.
Do you think that the younger generation seeks for the same human connection?
I definitely think they do, right? But I think it's changed from, like, if I think about when I was growing up, right? There were things like pen pals, and you could write to people, and it seems like years ago, right? And I think kids today still want it. So if I look at kids who are on Instagram, kids who use WhatsApp, who still want to connect with people, but just on a different platform, So I think that connectedness is there, but it's just at a different level. And I think one of the big things for me, and something that I'm trying to drive through Imagine Inc., is that need for social cohesion, and how do kids actually socialize and learn to work together. In this world of digital, it's so easy to send a WhatsApp, but it's so difficult to have a conversation. And I think kids need to still, that's like one of the future skills that kids still need to have. So in a world where everything can be automated and everything is going to be digitized, and careers are changing at the pace that they are, I think the one thing that kids need to not lose focus on is the ability to still connect with each other, the ability to know how to lead people, how to relate to people, how to empathize with people. I think that's something that a robot or a machine can't do. And in making themselves relevant for the future, they need to definitely invest in wanting to know more about being connected and learning skills that are that bring that out in them, being innovative, being creative, and all of that boils down to being connected to others.
So talking about Imagine Inc., this is a business that you have on the side where you help kids with technology and coloring outside the lines. What advice do you have for parents that want to encourage their kids to think outside the box?
Wow. So yeah, thank you very much for this question. So I think as a parent myself, I would urge other parents to, I don't know, stop trying to raise kids the way we were raised, I think, or the way our parents raised us, because the world that we existed in and the world that we were growing up in doesn't exist anymore. Kids today are exposed to far different challenges, that we ever faced in our growing up years. I think
True.
it's a different parenting style that we need to adopt. I think the other thing for me is, don't handicap your kids by making their lives easy. As much as this instant gratification is here, and kids want to be rewarded just for participating in things. Um, I think the real world out there requires us to be so much more resilient. And when you enter into the working world, and this is something that I've noticed, it's almost like, yeah, I've got my degree and I'm done. I've arrived. And I don't think you ever arrived, right? I think there's
Mm-hmm.
always this space to learn more, and there's always a space to become more and be better. And I think by making their lives easy, we almost make it seem as though once you've done this, it's good
Mm-hmm.
enough. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
that perseverance to always want to be better gets taken away, my opinion. And I think the last thing for me, just if I link it back to imagining, is allow them to be curious and to ask questions. I think our current education system doesn't allow that of them. It's a syllabus, and we need, as teachers, we need to go through this. And yeah, there's no space to be creative and innovative and problem solve. And I think as parents, we need to give them that space, and that's why Imagining was created.
I love that. I love that story. Do you want to give a quick elevator pitch on Imagine Inc?
Cool. So the startup was born last year, and I think for me it was around the gap that I saw in the current schooling system. Where kids are told, don't ask questions. We've got something we need to finish. It's there's limited time. I need to get through a syllabus and move on. And I think kids grow up with this mindset of, okay, I need to just be quiet, learn what the teacher told me to learn, and I'll be fine. And they come into a working world or into a space like innovation, right? And we say, think outside the box, guys, be problem solvers. And they're almost
Mm,
so overwhelmed by that, because in their whole learning, or if I can call it learning career, they've been told not to ask questions, not to be curious. And for me, Imagining was, how do we ready kids? I don't think they can ever be future proofed, but how do we ready them for what's out there? So equipping them with the skills to be creative. I usually go out to the areas in the Val that my dad used to immerse himself in, and tell kids about the fact that these new careers that are coming up, the fact that these new digital technologies like drones and big data and 3D printing exists. And the future is just, it has amazing opportunities and possibilities, because these technologies are not being communicated to them at the schools that they go to. So yeah, part of what Imagining does, we go out, we chat to kids who from previously disadvantaged areas, and even some of the kids who are in just mainstream schooling, who don't get an opportunity to be exposed to this, for them to know about the careers of the future and everything else that the new world is going to bring to them in terms of opportunities.
that is awesome. And that's really, really incredible. I love that idea. And I think it will definitely open up so many minds. Talking about learning more, you never stopped studying. Where did you get the hunger for knowledge? What has kept you going all these years? How do you find that work-life balance?
Another interesting question, Stacey. Thank you. So yeah, thanks for the question. I think I've always been curious, and I love reading. I love listening to new ideas, specifically ones that can shape what I currently know, and make me check myself so that I remain relevant constantly. I think if I have to think about, what's kept me going, I've always had an amazing support system, and I've been surrounded by really strong women like my mom. Where giving up is not an option. You finish what you start. You see things through. You put your whole self in it. And I think for me that's been it's really been my guiding light. About finding out who
Mm,
I am and finding what drives me. Work-life balance. Wow, Stacey. So I actually don't think it exists. I think it's a myth, right? And I've
okay.
learned this very late in my life, and some would disagree with me on this, but um, I've I've gotten to a point where you almost need to choose your priorities, right, and be very clear on what's important to you. Um, I was always a people pleaser. So any event I was invited to, I needed to attend. Um, any um, any ask or errand that I needed to help out with, I was there. And I think at some point you kind of need to pull back, because you will drive yourself insane with trying to balance what it is that you're aiming to achieve or your goals versus making sure that you are not letting people down, keeping your family together. So I think it's kind of, I think I've reached a point where the honest truth of reprioritizing what's important, what's not, has become such a reality for me, where I almost need to draw up stuff that says, this is my time. This is what I need to do. What's important versus what's urgent. And honestly, managing and checking myself on that so that the important things are always given priority. I mean, my family comes first. As much as my career is important, there is that balance between making sure that my career gets its attention and my kids get their attention and my family gets its time. But there's other stuff, if I can call it, like peripheral stuff that needs to be sort of pulled away, and I think, I don't know if it's as you get older and wiser, you realize this. But yeah, like I've reached this point where I think if I wanted to be everything to everyone, I would probably lose my mind.
Going off of that, there's this concept that think of it as like a triangle. There's health, there's career, and there's social life, all divided. And you can have two of those pieces of the triangle thrive, but always one is going to suffer. Do you agree with that?
I don't, right? So
you think that all three can thrive at the same time?
I think they can, right? Based on your perspective. So I would, if I think of like career and family and social, right? For me, and I've been very particular about what I let into those three spheres, right? So in terms of social, there's that happens. I'm not short of that. My career, my God, gets its focus. I love what I do. I'm so passionate about it. And my family gets the same, right? But I think it's how you balance it and what you see in those different spheres. So obviously, if I need to go out every Saturday night and every Sunday afternoon just to make sure that the social piece is ticked, I'm going to let go of one of the other two pieces, right? So how do you find that, and I think every person is different, right? So for me, like a monthly check-in with my closest friends who are, like, bless them, are not high maintenance at all, is sufficient for me to fill my cup. That for me is energizing. That's all I need for me to feel like I've had that social, we've met one another. I mean, we constantly chat as and when we can, but that monthly check-in is cool. I mean, it's enough, right? My career, I mean, that's my main focus, right? Because I'm so passionate about what I do, it spills into into my family. And if I have to be completely honest, I mean, my sons know about everything that I'm doing in Imagine Inc. They're actually involved in Imagine Inc. because it's built
That's
for
incredible.
kids. So, I try to bring them along in this journey just so that they do see mom, they do understand what mom is doing, and they are part of it as well. So I've kind of integrated the two, if I can say that, just so that there isn't a distinct split between 8 and 5. Do not disturb me because I am with my friends. I don't know. It kind of just melts together, and I found what works for me.
So you are the head of innovation at ABSA Life, which is part of ABSA Bank. Traditional banks are stereotypically known for slow processes and being stuck in their old ways. Being in the innovation space, what do you do to get your voice heard and ideas out there?
Wow. So sure, this is wow. Okay. I love talking about this. So thank you for the question. I think one of the biggest blessings that I've got, Stacey, is I am supported by senior leaders who see the value in new thinking, and especially new thinking to come up with or to solve old problems. And this has been, so for me, innovation it's not about a platform. It's not about it's not about a process, it's about people, so innovation for me is a big culture drive, where people need to feel confident enough to let their voices be heard. And I think for me, it really has been about, in my space, we actually encourage to challenge processes, where our managing executive would say, but if that doesn't work in an experimentation framework, how do we fit it, to make sure that we want to test, we want to experiment, we want to do a lot of things. How do we be open-minded enough to create that agility and that flexibility, right?
Yeah.
And I also think that, previously we always would compare ourselves against other banks or against other insurers. And I think the reality that we're facing is it's not them who are our competitors right now. It's also these new fintechs and startups, right? And I think it's finding a balance between how do we co-create solutions with them. So we're good at banking, or we're good at insurance, or we're good at, any big corporate is good at whatever it does, right? But how do you allow these fintechs and startups to start working together with you to co-create solutions that make sense to the customer? And again, it comes back to this purpose point around, we don't just innovate for the sake of innovating. You innovate to make the customer's life better. And I think when you have a shared purpose, so if I think about ABSA Life, there's a shared purpose around what it is why we come to work every day, which makes innovation so much easier. I think it's also about building a tribe. So it's not about your role. It's not about your designation or your grade or your level or whatever you may call it, right? It's about like-minded people who want to take the company forward. And for me, that's always how I've seen innovation being commercialized or being pulled through. It's by people who want to solve problems, people who want to make things happen. And yeah, it's quite amazing when you see that magic happen and you pull these people together in a room, right? So common purpose, a tribe, senior leaders who support you. I think that for me is important, right? And while getting ideas out there is, like I mentioned, there's a cultural piece, right? It's not only just about getting ideas out there, because ideas are a dime a dozen, but it's also about making those ideas happen. And for me, we've launched a lot of internal hackathons, external hackathons, and I think there's so many ideas, right? But for me, I think the real reward is seeing that idea reach the end customer. That for me is like, okay, we've made it. It's happened.
Going off of that, let's say I'm a young professional in a corporate setting where I feel that my voice isn't being heard, or that I'm just struggling to even get my ideas heard. Do you have any advice for somebody like that?
Wow. So I would say just keep on persevering. And one thing that has, so this is something that I say to all the innovators who enter our competitions, right? You may have a brilliant idea, but if it's not backed up by data, it kind of loses its own voice, if I can call it that, right? So if you've done customer research and you've got a really good idea and you can back it up with data that says, I've tested this idea out with 5 people or 10 people, and this is the impact it's going to have, you kind of, I'm going to say, not taken seriously, but it kind of adds some sort of gravity to what you're saying, because you've got data to back it up. So just having a good idea is great. That's your starting point, right? But how do you actually, and in our innovation competitions that we run, we say to the guys, it's not just about having an idea. You need to be able to tell me how you're going to put that idea into
articulate
motion.
It, yeah.
And that's when you see the real sparks of creativity being ignited and people thinking differently and not just what their role requires, because you kind of saying to them, I'm going to call it an entrepreneur, right? And think about, if this is your company or your idea is your startup, how would you see it through from start to end? And it creates such an energy in the team, Stacey. So I think for me, I would say it's great to have ideas, but how do you back it up? You need to believe in that idea so much that you're willing to give up everything for it, for other people to believe in it.
I love that. Thank you. That was great advice. Thanks, Aneesa, so much. I appreciate you being on the podcast. Where can listeners find you and reach you and connect with you?
Cool. So thank you very much for having me again, Stacey. This is such a privilege. So you can follow me on LinkedIn, Aneesa Ameer, or you can follow our Instagram page, Imagine Inc. ZA. And yeah, I think just good luck to everyone out there. I know lockdown and what's going on in the current environment is challenging. But yeah, good luck, and thank you to everyone who's listened to this podcast.
Thanks again. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Talking Success, Connecting the Global FinTech Community. Feel free to follow us on LinkedIn at Talent in the Cloud. And if you're interested in exec talent, expanding your team, or you yourself are looking for a new, exciting change in your career, check out our website, talentinthecloud.io.